What do you know about struggle? Every day that I wake up, I'm eepy. And I get out of bed. Eepy. I brush my teeth. Eepy. I wash my face. Eepy. I shower. Eepy. I eat. Eepy. I eepy. I eepy. Do you know what it's like to be as eepy as me? Do you know what I have to do on a daily basis while continuously eepy? The eepy struggle is real. Eepiness is not a joke, okay? Everything that I do is consumed by eepiness. And all I want to do is rest my little head on my bed pillow and go sleep. But I can't because I have to do things. The fuck is this?
Wow. That movie was an experience, man.
Yeah, I really like the message.
Yeah, me too.
We really gotta make as much money as possible, dude. We gotta grind and we gotta make money.
Wait, what are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
No, that's not the message.
Of course that's the message of the movie.
He's a terrible person.
He's the main character. What? If he's the main character, how can it possibly be bad?
What?
Just made me trip, fall and land on your lap. Something bad boy smooth, body hotter than a summer. I don't mean to be rude, but I look so damn good.
Part 65 of reasons why people don't want to work anymore. Potential trigger warning for this one, so get ready. A few years ago, I had a desk job and casually checked my phone to take a 5-minute break from work and saw that 2 friends passed in an accident. I was told, that's why you shouldn't be on your phone. And when I returned from the out-of-state funerals, I was asked how my vacation was. A former boss called me 3 times while I was in labor, asking me if I could hurry it up and come in. The last call, I yelled at him to leave me the F alone. He and other coworkers continued to call me during my maternity leave, wondering if I could cover for them. I had a boss years ago tell me I couldn't take off for my cousin's funeral unless I called coworkers to see if someone would cover for me. I said, well then I quit, and started walking out. Suddenly, they were able to work it out. They also wouldn't give me any of their numbers. How am I supposed to call and find a replacement if I don't have anyone's numbers? My husband's boss requires 2 weeks to schedule any kind of time off. I'm currently pregnant, and due to complications, they scheduled a C-section. My husband was able to give them the date of his time off a month and a half early, along with the reason. He got denied and was told, it's not our problem, figure it out. I had work at 7 a.m. and was hit with painful cramps early that morning, so I wore a hoodie for comfort. After explaining to my boss that I was in pain, and that's why I was wearing a hoodie, he kept pressing me about the pain. When I told him I had cramps, he told me, I don't need to know that. I worked at a nursing home and had a CNA harass me the entire time I worked there. I eventually came to my boss's office crying and told them that I was feeling suicidal because of what was happening and how I was being treated. They told me, well, you have to work with them, so you have to figure it out. I quit 2 weeks later. I started at my job, and first thing in the morning, a woman pays with the $20 bill. Then half an hour later, she comes back later yelling at my other coworkers saying I didn't give the correct change back because she assumed she paid with $100. It was early in the morning, and we didn't have a $100 bill in the register, and she left glaring at me. My daughter has narcolepsy, so she gets passing out spells from it. She passed out at work, and the manager called me to come get her, and the options were I pick her up or they call 911. She told them she would be fine after about a half an hour and some water. They insisted she leave, so I picked her up. They wrote her up upon her return for not finishing her shift. You know, the one they forced her to leave. Fiance had a worker die by a coworker with a pew-pew, In front of his team, bosses threatened to fire him for letting others take more than one day off to grieve the loss of their coworker and deal with the anxiety of the situation because a death isn't an excuse for us to lose out on making money. When I say get ready for number 10, get ready for number 10. I was 8 months pregnant and I fell down the stairs at work. No one would call an ambulance because I was being over dramatic. I had to drive myself to the ER where I was admitted for a torn placenta and delivered my baby via emergency C-section. They fired me for not asking permission to leave. Let's go wholesome. I had a pet pass away suddenly, and my partner called me in tears while I was at work to tell me. I couldn't hide the tears from my boss, and when she learned what was wrong, she told me to head home to handle everything with my partner. She stayed to watch the front desk for me and told me to take the next day too if I needed it. When I came back to work, she had got me a little mug that looked just like the pet I'd lost and gave me the biggest hug I've ever gotten. Just be nice. Just be nice. It's just be nice.
Horrifying new images are now coming out of Gaza showing men and boys being abducted by the IDF and taken naked to either be kidnapped and held somewhere or to mass execution sites. It has been confirmed that these guys are civilians, many of whom stayed behind in northern Gaza, either to take care of people who couldn't come down or because they didn't trust the IDF. How many more images of atrocities committed against the Palestinian people need to come out before we can finally say that Israel is a fascist, genocidal state intent on ethnic cleansing and exterminating the Gaza Strip? Every Zionist accusation is literally a confession. You remember in the first days after October 7th when they were talking about Hamas paraded a girl around naked, and it turns out that was just the outfit she had worn to the concert that she was at? This is literally that. They're literally doing it. And these boys and men are literally civilians, and they're being taken to God knows where, or they're being summarily executed. As images have already shown, we know they're executing people. On top of that, you have to understand, Palestinian men are the ones digging people out of the rubble. They're the ones digging the graves to put the bodies in, and bodies are already piling up. That's already a major health risk. But with the abduction and the execution of Palestinian men, you're going to see the spread of disease like you have never even witnessed. Israel literally wants to ethnically cleanse the Gaza Strip. How much more do we have to prove this? And the infuriating part about this is that whereas when it was alleged that Hamas was doing this shit, our politicians could condemn that all day. But now that Israel is doing it, we have to double check if it's actually happening. And if it's actually happening, then it's happening to Hamas. And if it is happening to civilians, well, that's the price of war. Our global institutions are literally openly facilitating a genocide. That's it. There is no room for discourse on this. This is genocide.
I don't have anything inherently against traditional or non-traditional relationships as long as everything is consensual and everyone's labor is being respected. But I do have a bone to pick with people who think they deserve a traditional partner even though they are either not able or not willing to be a traditional partner. And I've seen that attitude come from both men and women, both online and people that I've known in person, whether it's people I've dated or people I went to college with, etc. Where these particular men are frustrated that they can't find a woman who wants to cook and clean and maybe have their kids in the future, but then they're not financially providing for these women. Or on the flip side, women who are frustrated because they can't find a man who's going to pay for everything and financially support them, but they're not willing to do anything traditional. And I don't think they realize that when you ask for tradition, but you're not able to provide tradition, you're basically asking someone to make their life harder to make your life easier. I have an ex that accused me of hating traditional relationships and wanting to destroy the traditional family because I didn't want to immediately settle down and have kids and get married and take care of a home. But he still lived with his parents, not just to save money, because he had to, because he couldn't afford an apartment. And when I explained that, he told me, oh, so you want a man who has money, that's shallow. And I said, well, Yeah, if he wants me to be a housewife. I mean, otherwise I have to work full time. I have to support myself. I don't have the time to cater to someone. My current partner makes most of the money, and I do most of the housework and cooking and making appointments, whatever. And we're both happy to do it because we're both making the other person's life easier, not harder. You don't inherently deserve someone else's labor just because of your gender.
Excuse me, what are you doing? I'm seeing the wild racial injustice and my people getting murdered in the streets by police, and I'm using my platform to kneel for the national anthem. That is so disrespectful, so un-American. How dare you? Hey guys, so we're thinking that we're gonna have everyone kneel for the national anthem to show their solidarity. Just a clarifying question, are we showing solidarity for the 20,000 innocent civilians in Gaza that have been murdered, or? No, we're kneeling for Israel. Why would you think that?
Gentle reminder for anyone who has been radicalized by what we've been witnessing in the last couple months and all of the atrocities that are becoming more apparent and obvious in the last couple months and years, I guess. It is perfectly human for this to change you. It should change you. It should change the way that you interact with the world. It should change the way that you see yourself in relativity to the rest of the world. It should change your habits. It should change the way that you engage politically. It should change the ways you engage communally. This should change you. And the only way that the world changes, that things like this, that we can actually work towards preventing these types of things and intervening in these types of things, is that if we allow these things to change us and change how we actually engage in the world.
I feel like now more than ever, there is the largest disconnect between generations than there ever has been. And I could be wrong, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like between boomers and millennials and Gen Z, there is such a disconnect of what realities we're in right now. And I do feel like there's this level of ignorance that a lot of boomers have, and not all, but I feel like a lot, especially ones in power, that there is this denial that somehow we are not living in two separate worlds. And I'm not even talking about like the, oh, you guys can't afford a house because you buy fucking $7 lattes and avocado toast. Not like that. But like our collective reality and what we're experiencing as Gen Z and millennials is so astronomically different, I feel like, than a lot of the older generations. And I think this manifests itself in primarily us feeling fucking hopeless. I watched a video of this real estate agent guy talking about like, oh, if you want financial freedom by the time you're 30, buy 10 rental properties and then you'll make $14,000 a month, blah, blah, blah. How out of touch with reality do you have to be to think that we can just buy 10 rental properties? The majority of this country is living paycheck to paycheck. An unexpected $1,000 medical bill would bankrupt so many fucking people. And with this frustration, I am genuinely trying to understand from these older generations, was there a time in your guys' youth that you felt as hopeless as we did? I think us amongst the different generations have experienced similar levels of hopelessness. Like for anybody who lived through the Great Recession or the Cold War, I'm sure that there was a time where you felt absolutely hopeless. But I think the difference between our generations is that our generation, while we have to deal with, you know, the financial and economic crisis of the country right now, we also in the back of our minds have climate change that somehow so many of you have forgotten about. That like, yeah, even if we do get the economy back up and running and my generation is able to afford and buy a house where we want to live, in the back of our minds, we're still like 50 years away from fucking dying. So I guess what I'm trying to really understand right now is, was there a time in your guys' life where you felt as hopeless as my generation does right now, and how did you deal with it?
One of the things I pride myself in is my ability to talk about difficult topics. And it's something a lot of you have expressed that you appreciate about me as well. So let's have a difficult conversation. This year has made it extremely apparent how subconscious racism plays a role into the way that I'm perceived. Over the last few months, my partner has been on this page a lot more. And it's something that I've really loved. I love sharing my partner with y'all. But it's also bittersweet. We've gotten thousands of comments over the last few months from accounts that do not follow this page, asking for Max's account so that they can go and support her. Mind you, this is a joint page for both of us. It's been that way since I was arrested on a live stream in 2020 for protesting for Black Lives Matter. At that time, I was receiving a lot of overt racism, people telling me that I should have been unalived by the cops, people claiming that I had done criminal acts despite the fact that this was all documented and took place on a live stream, people assuming the worst because I was a person of color, advocating for myself. And that is a huge example of an implicit bias. In June of 2020, after the arrest happened, I deactivated this account, and I had a lot of conversations with my partner about not feeling like I was able to handle this level of attention and the amount of racism that would come with it. And the resolution that came with it is that Max would be a part of this account, in part so I wouldn't be alone in dealing with it, but also to shield me. But it's hard not to be reminded of covert and implicit racism when people who consume our content are more willing to support my white partner who only has a platform because of the work that I've done for 4 years, and they don't view me as worthy of the same support. And I wish it was just this, but it's not. Earlier this year, when I fundraised $2 million with Mercury Stardust, every single media outlet that interviewed both of us was hesitant to interview me and cut my portion either completely out or predominantly out. When the fundraiser was over, we were tagged in hundreds of videos celebrating the win, a large portion of which were only thanking Mercury. And the only reason I saw those videos is because people would comment, "Oh, and Jory," again showing that I was an afterthought. During that fundraiser, Mercury gained tens of thousands of followers, and I gained 1,000. And let me make it clear, I didn't do it with the intention of gaining followers or benefiting in any way. I didn't care about being in interviews, but the interviews were a way for us to get more attention to help our community. And in those things, I'm reminded that there are people like me that don't see representation for ourselves. Oftentimes because we are overlooked. Because even when we work just as hard or 10 times as hard as the white people around us, we're not celebrated to the same capacity. And it hurts. It hurts that I have to have these conversations, knowing how people don't want to check their own internal biases. It hurts to know that even if I have these conversations, people might unpack it a little bit, but it'll never be truly unpacked in our lifetime. It hurts to know that the same people in 2020 that were protesting at Black Lives Matter and talking about Black liberation still don't really see me for me. And it hurts the inner child that I have worked so hard to heal. The one that grew up wishing that she had blue eyes and straight hair and white skin, because anything less isn't valuable. So please be extra kind to the creators of color whose content you consume, because the equity we were talking about back in 2020 also includes showing us a little extra love to counteract the deficit that exists in society, and to counteract the fact that even when we work just as hard or harder, we will always hit the glass ceiling.
Yesterday, Republican Congressman Glenn Grothman from Wisconsin revealed the real reason why they are pursuing trans sports bans in a national hearing. You see, yesterday there was a national hearing over trans participation in sports in Congress, and Republicans brought out Riley Gaines, who is a famous anti-trans swimmer, as well as Sarah Perry from the Heritage Foundation. And in a question directed at Sarah Perry from the Heritage Foundation, Representative Grothman asked, "Why should we allow trans people in sports? If we allow trans people in sports, that might mean that they won't detransition, and that would be a shame."
From what I've read, the vast majority of people, 80 to 95%, who go what they call discordant gender identity, eventually come back to their original gender. And I sometimes wonder, as we normalize this idea of guys playing in women's sports, are you kind of creating a situation, which would be tragic if it's true, that some of these guys are now never going to switch back because their whole social setting is praising them for switching? And I think it would be just kind of too bad if they would have been the 80 or 95% at snap back, but because of this, they won't. Do you think that's a concern, Ms. Perry?
I think absolutely it's a concern. In fact, studies show that 75 to 90% of children, if they are allowed to progress through 75 to 90% of children, if allowed to progress through normal puberty, eventually make peace with their natal biological sex and avoid the trans dilemma altogether. We also know, based on studies, that social transitioning, including playing on a team specifically articulated by the Biden administration in its notice of proposed rulemaking, playing on the team that you want specifically for your gender identity, not based on sex, is an entree into ultimate medical transitioning. Now, with the rise of detransitioners, which we've seen in widespread formats, including out in California, where Kaiser Permanente is subject to multiple lawsuits for fast-tracking gender identitarian surgeries, the mind reels at what the implications are going to be.
Now, this reveals it all. Anti-trans bills are clearly meant to make life harder for trans people. In fact, they want to make life so hard on trans people that they feel forced to detransition. And then once they do, they're going to use those numbers to support further laws targeting trans people. Trans people deserve to be able to play. They shouldn't be banned from pool and darts and fishing and beauty pageants, but this is what they are trying to do. Anyway, now they've gone mask off. And you can thank Rep. Grothman for knowing exactly why they want to ban trans people from sports.
The babysitter put my son to sleep last night, so he was excited to see me in the morning. When I went in to wake him up, he asked me if I could lay down with him. Now, I was in a hurry. I needed to get him and his sister ready, drop him off at daycare, and then get to a meeting. But I didn't want to say no. So I told him, sure, son, we can lay down together once you go to the potty, wash your hands, and brush your teeth. Now he's a little less excited, and he's dragging his feet to the bathroom and finding reasons to get distracted and stalling. So I tell him, hey, the longer this takes, the less time we have to snuggle. So let's get it done. And I go get his sister ready. I come back from getting his sister ready, and he's gotten nowhere. Now there's no time to snuggle, so I'm taking over. I put him on the potty, wash his hands, brush his teeth, get him dressed, brush his hair, put his shoes on, his coat on, give him a granola bar, we get out the door. Whole time he's fussing. Everything is taking longer than it should because he's not cooperating, and I'm in a hurry. While we're walking to the car, he's stomping and crying, but I gotta get him to daycare and get to my meeting. I put his sister in the car seat and go over to strap him in, and he's struggling with me, trying to fight me off with his 2-year-old self. I said, son, we have to go. Let's get buckled in. Tears in his eyes, scream crying. He said, I want a hug, Daddy. I want a hug. I pulled him out of his seat and I gave him a hug, and I realized that I was going to be late for my meeting, not because I was hugging him then, but because I didn't hug him when he first asked for it. He started his day asking to connect with me. He had spent a night without me and needed time to connect with his dad, and I responded to him telling me his needs by telling him which of my needs he needed to meet first. And he didn't know how to handle that, because he's 2. Here I am thinking he's just fussing at me while I uphold this routine, when in reality I'm crushing the excitement he felt when he saw me in the morning. In fatherhood, every time I think I'm teaching a tough lesson, it turns out I'm learning one. I'm learning that connection is not a luxury but a need, and I'm recognizing how strong my 2-year-old son is for recognizing and clearly stating his need despite being distressed. Just a good kid.
Let it be known that I respect all women.
All women?
Yes, I respect 100% of women.
What about Margaret Thatcher?
I respect 99.9% of women.
Not only was there a better balance, but there was a specific intended purpose to the adults in Muppets. The diverse cast of adults helped normalize other ethnicities that had largely only been given specific stereotyped roles up to that point in media.
I don't remember ever reading for any kind of a positive character. The only roles that I could find were gang members or drug addicts. I had gotten a role on television that was the role of a Latino, Mexican-American, who was like a regular person.
On Sesame Street, they were all able to be strong and safe role models to the children on set, but also the children watching at home. The adults were also the ones guiding the learning on the show. This makes sense since a number of the cast members came from educational backgrounds. They showed proper methods on how to educate children, but also how to handle behavioral issues, social issues, and other questions that kids have. Of course, a famous example of this comes from the episode Goodbye, Mr. Hooper, when Big Bird struggles to understand the death of another adult cast member, Mr. Hooper.
Big Bird, when people die, they don't come back. Ever? No, never.